Are you enjoying yourselves so far? My great pleasure to present Andrew and Sue, Havering College.
Hello, so we're from the Foundation Diploma in Art and Design at Havering College, and we're going to briefly show you some of the ways we've been using wikis and blogs on our course. I'm Sue and that's Andrew, but that's fairly obvious, I imagine. So first, a little bit of context. A Foundation Diploma is a bridge between school and university, really. It's a fairly long established route, and the aim is to prepare students for degree level study. We have to expand their knowledge of art and design practice so they can identify the specialist area they wish to pursue. And that means that in any given cohort we're supporting a really wide range of students' interests, which could be from architecture all the way through to specialist makeup. The students are also quite a diverse mix. We regularly have high-achieving, ambitious students who progress to prestigious institutions such as Goldsmiths or Slade, as well as those who struggle in traditional academic settings and might fare better in less competitive environments. And as a reflection of the needs of our students, the course team is also quite diverse. So no one works solely on the foundation course, and we are quite a loose-knit group and don't necessarily see each other much in the staff room. So by using wikis and blogs to organise information, essentially we have two aims: to improve the learning experience of the students and to ease the administrative burden of the staff. Any technology or strategy we adopt is driven by these two goals. I'm going to hand over to Andrew, who is hopefully going to explain in a little bit more detail what we have done. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to start by just talking very briefly about wikis. Really, just to start, as a way of thinking of the wiki, it's an easy way to build a web page. You can use the word processor, you'll be absolutely fine. And our students have no trouble with that. Other big advantage is that they're document free, which means that there aren't any files to move around. Anything you make just lives on the web. That's a huge advantage. We have come to realise that it's important to think of everything as a collaboration. We're starting to just use that as a lens to examine everything through. And that started with our use of wikis, and we're carrying on with that idea. It's clearly important to how we work as a species. It's completely built into us. If you want to get anything done, you need to collaborate. So we're looking at collaborative software. And of course, wikis are specifically designed to be collaborative. And they're also accessible from everywhere. We control permissions, or you have control of permissions, so you can say who can access a wiki, who can write the content, who can read it, and they're central to our wiki strategy. History, which allows them to simply step back in time to see earlier versions of pages, are also really important to the way that we use wikis. I'll be demonstrating some of that. It's a way, for instance, of making sure that tutor comments don't get lost. Okay. And now I'm on two mics. Okay. When you think of a wiki, the obvious example is Wikipedia. The canonical example, wonder of the modern world. We've only just started using wikis in that way. The examples I'm going to show you are a kind of, they are a subversion. It's a very mild subversion, nothing very complicated, but we're not really using wikis in the classic way, at least not yet. We've got some examples where we started to do that, but I'm kind of showing you the history of how we went through this. Okay, I'm going to show you or introduce three different types of wiki that we use, starting with the simplest examples and working through to where it gets more complicated. The first kind, our digital portfolio and progression appointments wiki. is really a way of avoiding doing secretarial works. Essentially, the students contribute the data and build the page for you. The second example I will show you is a way of delivering feedback privately online. Okay, so the staff are building a page, or the staff get together to sort of build a compilation of feedback that a student can have a look at. And obviously feedback needs to be private. And the third example I'm going to show you is a way of dealing with things like essay writing. So the student writes in a place where progress can be monitored and you can provide feedback. You can see what they're doing all the time without a student having to hand a piece of work in. You can actually see the progress of the work as it happens, gently. Okay, so if I switch over to our web browser and we can have a look at some of this actually straight off Moodle. So, and fantastic. Okay. So the first one I'm going to show you is our simplest example. It's our digital portfolio wiki. We get our students to make a digital portfolio on Flickr that they use for all sorts of things. They need it for UCAS applications quite a lot. We get them to present out of it, stuff like that. So in this simple example, I put together a template, which is essentially everything except for all those links. And the trick here is we get the students to simply put all those links in for themselves. We're avoiding this kind of secretarial work. We're avoiding having to sort of interpret things. I think it's worth just thinking, this is very, very straightforward, but you think, how else would you actually do this? If you imagine having 40 students and passing a piece of paper around maybe and getting them to write links on it, and then you can try and interpret their handwriting, and then you could put them in a Word document, and then you could put that on Moodle maybe, okay? Or you could get them to all email you a link, and then you'd have to deal with 40 emails and you'd have to compile it. Essentially, the secretarial work disappears. It's a really simple idea. It's a collaborative document. It lives in just one place because it's document free, and everybody knows where to see it. Okay, I have a second example of this kind of thing. Just go back here into our tutorial page. We've got a progression appointments wiki. Our students are regularly going off for UCAS interviews and things like that. We need to keep some sort of track of them. You know, we need to know where they are if they're not in their sessions. And the other thing that we need to do is we need to know that when they go to an interview at some art school, at some university, they've got a portfolio that's going to show them at their best. So we need to know when those interviews are so that we can get together with them, help them get themselves organised, make sure everything looks good for the interview. Okay, I have a page that's filled in by the students. Again, we're getting them to do this. We don't have to do it. It's a really, really simple arrangement, a bit like a diary page. Our students are just individually filling in what they're doing, where they're going, when it's happening, what they need. Is it a digital portfolio? Is it an interview? Is it a physical portfolio that we need? We have portfolio sessions every week. We have a look at the wiki and we see who's got an interview coming up in the next week. We can keep a track of them. Moving to example number 3, this is the feedback wiki. Sorry, let me just close a whole load of tabs that I really don't need. Feedback. Every student, so this is the feedback area, every student has access to a wiki that their feedback will be put onto. I faked one up in order to protect the innocent. So here's a fake one. This is an anonymous student, which I've hacked together. Over here, we've got a menu with all the different pages on, in reverse chronological order. And these pages are these are put together directly by the members of staff. So there's a template which I build and I put into the wiki in the first instance, and then each member of staff simply writes their feedback into their slot. Again, what we've got here is simply a compilation of the feedback in a nice, easily to understand place, in a place where it can't get lost. If you print feedback out for students, they're liable to lose it. It means, for instance, that a tutor, if somebody is responsible for a student, they can actually get a proper overview of what that student's done, how they're doing, how they're coping with different subjects, what they're doing well, what they need to be thinking about, what they need to improve on. Okay, so the big advantage of this being document free is that it can be accessed all the time by all members of staff from anywhere, and indeed the student. There's no need to be in the physical presence of a student anymore. And just one more thing on this feedback wiki is that because it's a wiki, because it's a web page, so here's just another page here, we've started videoing our crits. Crits contain, or crits and presentations that is, because they contain lots of verbal feedback that the student gets, and of course in the middle of a crit or in the middle of a presentation you might not be listening particularly hard to what you're being told or the advice that you're being given. This allows students to go back and review what they were told or what they were advised or how the conversation went. Okay, third example coming up, which is what we call our formal writing wiki. Again, all of our students have access to a formal writing wiki. It belongs to them. They've got read-write access to it. All the tutors have read-write access to it, but again, it's done in private. Here's an anonymous one that I've put together. We get students to do the majority of their formal writing actually starting here. So we've got all sorts of proposals, exhibition reviews, little bits of writing that they're putting together for a portfolio of writing, a statement of intent for their final major project. And here I'm just going to look at an example I put together which is for a UCAS statement. This is actually the final version of it. This is the thing that would have simply been cut and paste into the UCAS website. If I look at the history of this, just to show you the kinds of things that you can do with a system like this, the very first page of this is actually something that I set up. It is simply a template, dividing a personal statement into 4 paragraphs and leaving some space for each paragraph that the student might write. As we step through history here, the student started filling it in. Next version, students decided they don't need that outline guidance anymore. The document's starting to live on its own. As we step through here, they've made a few changes. As we step through here, we've got the students to actually swap seats. We could have done this by permissions, but we generally, in a tutorial session, we get students to swap seats and comment on each other's writing. What this means is that if the whole class, if the cohort understands what they're supposed to be doing, then they can explain to each other what they're supposed to be doing, and they can leave those comments. And essentially what they're doing is it's almost like they're preparing it so that it's ready for a tutor to actually see it. So we would hope, for instance, that grammatical errors got caught at that moment. Things like spelling. If you're sitting at a computer, you might want to try and get your spelling right. It might be reasonable to expect that the spelling was right before a tutor actually saw it. Stepping through again, we've now got 2 tutors. So that's actually Sue and personal tutor for this student, Liam, who are commenting on the writing again. But these 2 tutors know what each other is doing. They're not being played off one against another. They're aware of the advice that each other has given, and they're giving advice deliberately in two different ways. So Sue's giving some sort of an overview in blue, some general remarks. Liam's coming in and saying, you know, specific parts of sentences that you might like to change. So you don't have tutors tripping over each other's toes. It's the kind of thing that happens as you get towards a deadline where a student will go running around trying to get advice from everybody. And using a system like this, it means that there is only one version of the file around at any one time. They haven't emailed two different versions, and that there's lots of duplicated effort. Okay, and then as we carry on, stepping through, we've got back to the end. That's the final version that the student would have simply cut and pasted into UCAS, and we've been able to look at it right the way through. Other advantages with this. You can see how far a student has got without the need for a formal hand-in. You know, you can start something and say, okay, in 4 weeks we have to get this finished, but if you haven't seen it in those intervening 4 weeks, or it's not easy to see in those intervening 4 weeks, you don't really know if they're getting on with it or not. It gives you an opportunity to issue gentle reminders, and students have fewer opportunities to conceal their problems, because not getting on with something like this is essentially a problem. There is some barrier to learning, and this allows us to spot things like that. It avoids things like the I've forgotten my USB stick accidentally on purpose kind of problem. There's only one copy of the document. Students are usually, or sorry, I should say often, quite bad about versioning their work. They'll jump to something called statement final after a couple of hours, and then after that moment it's called statement final for the next 6 weeks. Okay, so we're avoiding the I say the new version but I don't know where it is problem, because we know exactly where it is. It's on that web page. The need for multiple cycles of collecting, marking and then redistribution, that all goes away as well. Again, we know where the thing is. It stays in the same place all the way through. And any comments that are put on it, the reason for showing you the history there, is that if you were, for instance, marking an essay on a piece of paper and you put red marks all over it and you hand it back to the student, you've now lost the work that you've done. If they mislay that somewhere, or it's buried in your email, looking on a slightly brighter side, you've actually lost all the work that you've done. Here you can step back through and you can see what you commented, and you can see, make some judgment about whether the student just needs to be reminded that they haven't really done that. Okay, we also use blogs. So all our students have a blog. I'll just show you a blog very, very quickly. There we go. Again, all of our students have a blog. This is Emma's blog. Coming up. In a fairly standard format, just building up, organised through time, as blogs always are. I don't know that I need to explain to you, I presume I don't need to explain too much about blogs. But I do have a few things to say about the way that we use blogs. Okay, so we're thinking of blogs as being an adjunct to a sketchbook. We don't mind whether a student, we're working in art and design, we don't mind if the student is using a paper sketchbook or a digital version of a paper sketchbook. All the same to us, we don't mind. It's worth remembering that some content doesn't actually fit in a paper sketchbook. So, for instance, there's not a great deal of point in writing down a URL. There really isn't. You want something that you can click. And you can put bits of video onto a blog or just onto a web page, however you're doing this. Into some electronic format you can put a piece of video. That video might be a student's work. They might really be making a video. That's what they're actually doing. It might be a video of some empirical thing, their empirical research. They might be making videos of how they're making some kind of casting or some process. Or it might be a clip from a film, if they're a fashion student, for instance, to just say, well, you know, look at the costumes here. Okay? Just to make it clear to people who aren't familiar with art and design, sketchbook's not a fantastically great word anymore. Sketchbooks aren't books full of carefully shaded drawings and pretty little watercolours. In art and design, sketchbooks are a repository for research, just to kind of make that clear. So it's a research tool, and that easily translates through to the blog format. We change permissions as we go through the course on the blogs as students get used to each other. We start out with the blogs being private to the student and the tutors can see them, and then gently we open this out to the whole cohort, and that allows students to comment on each other's blogs. And we have moments when we deliberately get them to do that, and eventually they get used to the idea and that takes off and they can get on with it on their own. And some students really take to blogging. Just as an example, this year we had an autistic student who had trouble organising things. So his sketchbook, for instance, was a whole load of loose leaf papers in a carrier bag, which was really difficult to assess. You couldn't really tell what he was doing, but he enjoyed blogging, and of course, once you're using a blog, that organisational problem goes away. He doesn't have to do his own organisation. He was much happier just sort of stacking stuff up in a blog. And he made, what, 250? It's a 9-month course. He made 250 blog posts. So he was really going for it. We're looking forward to that moment of mobile access where when a student goes and visits a gallery or an exhibition, instead of taking their sketchbook, they've got their phone with them. And they're either sketching on their phone, taking photographs, and then directly blogging somehow or other. Okay? And I think that's the end of my bit.
Okay. Thank you.
Back to Sue.
So these are some of the strategies that work for us. We've been running the course like this for about 3 years now. And using wikis in particular has enabled us to respond quickly to the changing needs of our students and support them more effectively through the rapidly shifting landscape of UCAS applications in particular, I think. It's really firmly embedded now as our go-to method of problem solving, and I really don't want to imagine what it would be like to organise the course without using collaborative software. So that's us, really.
I think that's us.
I mean, just fantastic. I mean, it seems such a simple, straightforward thing. We could all just go back and see if we can get started. Now then, colleagues, before we go, I just wanted to draw your attention to what's happening next.